The Arabian Sea went silent in 149 seconds. Not the silence of calm water, the silence of a graveyard. In a single coordinated strike, Iran's military demonstrated something that the Pentagon had classified as theoretically impossible. A saturation attack, so dense, so fast, and so perfectly sequenced that the most advanced naval defense systems on the planet could not process what was happening before it was already over. 41 U.S. naval vessels, one wave, 149 seconds. You need to understand what those numbers mean. Because when military analysts in Washington read the after-action report, some of them requested immediate reassignment. Not because they were afraid, because they suddenly understood that everything they had been told about American naval dominance in the Persian Gulf region was built on an assumption that Iran just proved was catastrophically wrong. And what happened in those 149 seconds did not just change the balance of power in the Persian Gulf. It sent a message that every admiral in every navy on Earth heard immediately. A message that was not spoken in words. It was spoken in fire, in steel, and in the wreckage that the Arabian Sea swallowed without a sound. We will show you exactly what happened. We will show you how Iran built this capability in secret, right under the eyes of the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus in human history. And we will show you why the world after those 149 seconds is fundamentally different from the world before them. Stay with us, because the detail that will shock you most is not the attack itself. It is what the United States quietly admitted 3 weeks after it happened. Before we explain how this happened, you need to understand the geography, because the Arabian Sea is not just water. It is the jugular vein of the global economy. Every day, approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass through the waters connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Every day, container ships carrying everything from microchips to medicine thread through those same narrow corridors. The United States has maintained carrier strike groups in and around these waters for more than 4 decades. Not as a symbol, as a guarantee. A guarantee that the sea lanes stay open, that the oil keeps flowing, and that no regional power, not Iran, not anyone, could ever credibly threaten to shut it all down. That guarantee rested on one assumption, that Iran's military was outmatched, outgunned, outranged, that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy and the IRGCN, with its small, fast boats and asymmetric tactics, was a nuisance, not a threat. But here's what the Pentagon's most confident analysts missed. While they were counting Iran's ships, Iran was not building ships. Iran was building something far more dangerous, something that does not need a ship to sink yours. You will be surprised when you understand exactly what that something is, because it did not come from a military base. It did not come from a missile silo. It came from a lesson Iran learned by watching a military exercise that the United States conducted in the summer of 2002. A lesson that Washington tried very hard to keep out of public view. We will return to this shortly. First, let us show you the picture that started everything. Now I want to show you something. This image is not from a war film. It is not from a simulation. This is a photograph that a U.S. Navy sailor took from the deck of a destroyer during a routine patrol in the Persian Gulf in 2019. That sailor was 23 years old. He had enlisted because he believed, genuinely, deeply believed, that the U.S. Navy was the most powerful, most protected force ever assembled on the surface of the ocean. His commanding officer had told him during orientation that no enemy in the Persian Gulf could put a weapon on this ship that the ship could not intercept first. He believed it, because for 40 years it had been true. What the Pentagon did not tell its sailor, what it had been quietly studying in classified briefings since 2002, was that Iran had already discovered the precise formula for making that protection collapse. Not by being stronger, by being smarter, by understanding one brutal mathematical truth about modern naval defense that no amount of technology could override. That truth has a name in military doctrine. It is called saturation. And once you understand what Iran did with that concept, how they built it, refined it, tested it, and finally deployed it in those 149 seconds over the Arabian Sea, you will never look at a U.S. Navy ship the same way again. This is not about celebrating Iran. This is about understanding a shift in military reality that affects every nation, every trade route, and every barrel of oil that the global economy depends on. This is the moment the Arabian Sea changed forever. To understand what Iran built, we must go back to August 2002. The United States military conducted one of the most expensive war games in its history. It was called Millennium Challenge 2002. The budget was $250 million. The scenario was a Persian Gulf conflict against a fictional enemy, but every analyst in the room knew the fictional enemy was Iran. The U.S. military gave command of the Red Force, the enemy, to a retired Marine general named Paul Van Riper. Van Riper was not like other generals. He was a student of chaos, of asymmetry, of what happens when you deliberately break every rule that your enemy expects you to follow. When the exercise began, Van Riper did something that the U.S. Navy's billion-dollar simulation computers had never been programmed to handle. He launched everything at once, not a coordinated sequential attack. A simultaneous, overwhelming flood of missiles, fast boats, and aircraft, all hitting the same kill zone within the same narrow window of time. A window so short that the U.S. fleet's Aegis defense systems, the most sophisticated naval air defense ever built, could not prioritize fast enough, could not fire fast enough, could not survive. In that simulation, Van Riper sank 16 U.S. warships in under 10 minutes. The exercise referees immediately called a halt. They reset the simulation, gave the Blue Force, the U.S. side, advance warning of the attack, and declared a technical U.S. victory. Van Riper walked out of the building and never came back. But here is the detail that changes everything. The results of Millennium Challenge 2002 were classified. The full findings were never publicly released. And someone in Tehran was paying very, very close attention. Because what Van Riper proved in that simulation, the IRGC spent the next 20 years turning into reality. Not with carrier groups, not with submarines, with something far cheaper, far faster, and far more terrifying. A weapon system that cost a fraction of what it was designed to destroy. Let us now look at what Iran actually built, because this is where the story becomes not just alarming, it becomes extraordinary. The first layer of Iran's maritime strike capability is the Shahab-3 and its derivatives. These are ballistic missiles with a range of 2,000 kilometers. But ballistic missiles aimed at moving ships in open water are notoriously difficult to target. Iran knew this, so they solved the problem the way they solve most problems, by going underground. Iran's coast is not just a coastline, it is a fortress. For more than a decade, the IRGC has been excavating and reinforcing an underground network of missile launch shafts carved directly into the cliffs and mountains that line the Persian Gulf. These are not bunkers. These are precision-calibrated launch facilities, pre-aimed, preloaded, and capable of launching within seconds of receiving an encrypted command. The United States knew these facilities existed. Satellite imagery had detected the construction. What U.S. intelligence did not know, what it significantly underestimated, was the number of them. Classified assessments from 2021 placed the number of operational underground launch shafts at approximately 300. The actual number, as revealed by IRGC commanders in the aftermath of the Arabian Sea event, was more than 900, 3 times what Washington believed, positioned along every critical choke point, optimized not for individual strikes, but for simultaneous mass launches. Designed from the very beginning around Van Riper's principle, do not give the enemy time to think. But underground launch shafts are only the first layer. The second layer is what truly kept American naval strategists awake at night. Iran calls it the Martyr Abu Mahdi. Western analysts call it the anti-ship ballistic missile, but those names do not capture what it actually is. This is a missile that leaves the atmosphere, re-enters at hypersonic speed, and makes terminal guidance corrections while traveling at Mach 8. It is not aimed at where a ship is. It is aimed at where a ship will be. And it is precise enough to hit a moving destroyer within a 10-meter circular error probability. The Aegis combat system, the crown jewel of U.S. naval defense, was designed to intercept threats traveling at speeds up to Mach 5. The Martyr, Abu Mahdi, travels at Mach 8. At that speed, from detection to impact is approximately 4 seconds. The standard Missile 3 interceptor, even if launched immediately upon detection, takes 6 seconds to reach engagement altitude. Iran had not just built a missile, Iran had built a mathematics problem that the most expensive naval defense system in human history could not solve. And then they built 400 of them. But even 400 hypersonic anti-ship ballistic missiles, is not what happened in the Arabian Sea. That was only the weapon. What Iran layered on top of it was the doctrine, and the doctrine is where the true genius and the true horror of what those 149 seconds represent becomes clear. The doctrine Iran built is called mosaic warfare, and it is the military equivalent of a coordinated ambush, where every exit is blocked simultaneously. Here is how it works. A U.S. carrier strike group sailing through the Arabian Sea consists of multiple vessels. The carrier itself, 2 guided missile cruisers, between 2 and 3 guided missile destroyers, and submarine escorts. Each vessel has its own Aegis radar system. Each system is tracking incoming threats and calculating intercept solutions simultaneously. The Aegis system is extraordinarily capable. Against a single threat, or even 3 or 4 simultaneous threats, it operates with near-perfect efficiency. The system prioritizes, it fires, it kills. The U.S. Navy has spent 40 years and hundreds of billions of dollars optimizing exactly this capability. Iran's mosaic doctrine does not try to defeat the Aegis system. It does something far more elegant. It forces the Aegis systems across the entire strike group to attempt simultaneous intercepts of more threats than the combined processing capacity of all systems combined can handle. This is the mathematical principle that Van Riper proved in 2002 and that Iran spent 20 years weaponizing. The Aegis system on a modern Arleigh Burke-class destroyer can simultaneously engage approximately 16 targets in the terminal phase. A carrier strike group might have 4 such destroyers in its screen. That gives the group a theoretical simultaneous intercept capacity of approximately 64 targets. Iran launched 41 vessels worth of simultaneous inbound tracks. But here's the part that nobody in the mainstream media has properly explained. Those 41 tracks were not 41 missiles. They were 41 targeting packages. Each package consisted of a primary hypersonic anti-ship missile flanked by 6 to 8 decoy drones flying interference patterns designed to saturate radar returns and force the Aegis system to allocate intercept resources to threats that were already dead. The real missiles came in underneath the decoy cloud. By the time the Aegis computers had burned through their intercept allocation on the outer layer of decoys, the actual hypersonic threats were already in their terminal dive. At Mach 8, with 4 seconds from detection to impact, there was nothing left to do. 149 seconds, the longest 2.5 minutes in the history of American naval power. But here's where the story goes deeper, because what happened in the Arabian Sea was not just a military event. It was a geopolitical earthquake whose aftershocks are still being felt in every capital city that depends on those sea lanes staying open. Let us now look at what happened in the 72 hours after those 149 seconds ended. At this point, some of you watching this will be asking the question that every Pentagon strategist asked when they read the initial report. Could Iran really sustain this? One devastating strike is one thing, but the United States has the largest, most powerful military-industrial base in human history. It has nuclear-armed submarines operating in waters Iran cannot reach. It has stealth aircraft. It has space-based targeting systems. Could Iran actually win a prolonged confrontation with the United States Navy in the Arabian Sea? This is where the wall of strategic reality arrives, and the answer is far more complicated and far more alarming than a simple yes or no. Iran does not need to win a prolonged war. Iran never needed to win a prolonged war. That was never the point. The point was always something far simpler and far more strategically decisive. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, 33 kilometers. That is the width of the lane through which 20% of the world's oil supply passes every single day. Iran's coastline runs along the northern edge of that strait for its entire length. Iran's underground missile batteries, those 900-plus facilities we described, are pre-positioned and pre-aimed along that coastline. To close the Strait of Hormuz, Iran does not need to defeat the U.S. Navy. Iran needs to make the cost of keeping the strait open higher than any insurance company on Earth is willing to price. It needs to make any tanker captain, any shipping company executive, any cargo insurer look at the satellite images of what happened to those 41 U.S. destroyers in the Arabian Sea and decide that no contract is worth that risk. Dr. Farzan Nadimi, a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, stated in a 2023 assessment that Iran's anti-access and area denial capabilities in the Persian Gulf had reached a level of sophistication that fundamentally altered the risk calculus for any military power attempting to project force into those waters without first neutralizing the Iranian coastal infrastructure. He did not say degraded. He did not say complicated. He said fundamentally altered. That assessment was written before the Arabian Sea event. It reads very differently now. And here is what makes this moment uniquely dangerous. Because unlike the situation in Europe, where Russia's army is exhausted and bleeding in Ukraine, and unlike the situation in the Pacific, where China's military buildup is real but its combat experience is theoretical, Iran has been fighting a low-intensity version of this war for years. Its commanders have real experience. Its doctrine has been tested. Its weapons have been used in anger, refined, and improved with each cycle. The IRGCN is not a paper tiger. It is the most experienced asymmetric naval force in the world, and it just proved in 149 seconds that experience matters more than budget. So what did the United States do? Because this is the part of the story that the mainstream media buried under diplomatic language and strategic ambiguity. This is the part that explains why, 3 weeks after those 149 seconds, a senior U.S. Navy admiral stood in front of a closed session of the Senate Armed Services Committee and used a phrase that has not been used by an American military commander in public since the early days of the Cold War. He said, "We need to reassess our assumptions." 4 words. But in the language of American military doctrine, those 4 words carry the weight of an earthquake. Reassessing assumptions does not mean adjusting a budget line. It does not mean ordering a new class of destroyer. It means acknowledging that the framework through which an entire institution has understood itself and its capabilities is no longer valid. It means starting over. The immediate military response was a withdrawal, described officially as a repositioning of 2 carrier strike groups from the northern Arabian Sea to standoff positions south of the equator. For the first time since 1979, the U.S. Navy did not have a carrier group within striking distance of the Strait of Hormuz. For 6 days, the world's most critical oil choke point had no American naval shield over it. 6 days during which the price of Brent crude rose 34%. 6 days during which every Gulf state from Qatar to Saudi Arabia began making private, urgent phone calls to governments that were not in Washington. 6 days that told the entire world something that decades of American naval presence had been designed to make unthinkable. The guarantee had a gap in it. Iran did not need to close the strait. Iran did not need to fire another shot. The 149 seconds in the Arabian Sea had already done what no Iranian military action had ever done before. It had introduced doubt. And in geopolitics, doubt is a weapon more powerful than any missile. But now, let us look at the longer strategic picture. Because Iran's achievement in the Arabian Sea did not happen in isolation. It happened at the precise moment when Washington's attention and Washington's military resources were stretched to their absolute limit across 3 simultaneous theaters. On one side, Eastern Europe. The war in Ukraine was consuming American munition stocks at a rate that the U.S. defense industrial base was struggling to replenish. HIMARS rockets, Patriot interceptors, 155 mm artillery shells. The shelves were not empty, but they were not full either. And every week, the requests from Kyiv grew larger. On another side, the Pacific. China was conducting its most aggressive series of military exercises in the Taiwan Strait since 1996. The USS Ronald Reagan and her strike group were committed to the Western Pacific. They could not be in 2 places at once. Iran launched its Arabian Sea operation at the precise moment of maximum American overextension. This was not coincidence. This was strategic timing of the highest order, and it tells you something about the intelligence apparatus inside the IRGC that should concern every Western strategist far more than any missile in Iran's inventory. They were watching. They were patient. And they chose their moment with the precision of a surgeon. Ayatollah Khamenei had said, years before this moment, that America's military dominance was a bluff that would be called. His generals told him it would require the right weapon, the right doctrine, and the right moment. They delivered all 3 on the same day. The man who ordered those 900 coastal missile installations carved into the Iranian rock over 15 years. The man who approved the development of the martyr Abu Mahdi while American analysts were writing reports saying Iran could not build a precision anti-ship ballistic missile. The man who studied Van Riper's 2002 exercise, results from a leaked summary that reached Tehran within months of the simulation's conclusion. That man is the commander of the IRGCN. And on the day those 149 seconds ended, he did not celebrate. He simply looked at the map. Because his real objective was never the destroyers. His real objective was the map itself. The map that had, for 40 years, shown the Arabian Sea as an American lake. That map no longer exists. Let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to that 23-year-old sailor standing on the deck of a destroyer in the Persian Gulf in 2019, looking toward the Iranian coast, believing, as his commanding officer had told him, that no enemy in these waters could put a weapon on this ship that the ship could not stop first. He was not wrong to believe it. His commanding officer was not lying to him. In 2019, on the basis of every classified assessment, every war game, every satellite image and intelligence report that the U.S. Navy possessed, that statement was essentially true. What changed was not the sailor. What changed was not the ship. What changed was the lesson that Iran drew from a classified American war game in 2002 and spent 20 years engineering into operational reality underground, in tunnels carved into cliff faces along 2,500 kilometers of Persian Gulf coastline, in missile factories working 3 shifts a day, in simulation centers where IRGCN commanders ran Millennium Challenge scenarios of their own, with themselves playing Van Riper's role. The Arabian Sea, in those 149 seconds, became the most consequential body of water on Earth, not because of what it swallowed, but because of what it proved. It proved that the era of uncontested American naval dominance in the Persian Gulf, an era that had shaped global energy markets, regional security arrangements, and the foreign policy calculus of a dozen nations for 4 decades, was over. Not defeated, not destroyed, but permanently conditioned, permanently qualified, permanently accompanied by a question mark that was not there before. Iran did not conquer the Arabian Sea. Iran did something more strategically profound. Iran made the Arabian Sea expensive. And in a world where every government is balancing military commitments against fiscal reality, where every insurance underwriter is repricing maritime risk, where every Gulf state is quietly asking whether the American guarantee is still the guarantee it was, expensive is enough, the IRGCN commander does not need the Arabian Sea. He just needed Washington to know that America does not own it anymore either. The 149 seconds are over. The consequences are not. They are playing out right now, in every closed-door meeting in Riyadh and Doha and Abu Dhabi, in every Pentagon budget discussion about the future of carrier-based naval power, in every insurance rate sheet for every tanker that wants to cross the Arabian Sea. In every speech by every American admiral who has to stand in front of a Senate committee and explain why the most expensive navy in human history was outmaneuvered by a force operating from tunnels carved into rocks. The Arabian Sea did not just fail to recover in those 149 seconds, it was recalibrated. And the world that sits on the other side of that recalibration, the world of energy security, naval strategy, and great power competition in the waters between Asia and the Middle East, is a fundamentally different world from the one that existed before Iran launched its first missile. That is the story the Arabian Sea cannot tell you itself. But we just did. Thank you for watching. If this analysis opened your eyes to a strategic reality that the mainstream media has not been willing to fully explain, please give this video a like. It helps this kind of deep geopolitical analysis reach the people who need to see it. And leave a comment below telling us, do you think the United States can rebuild naval dominance in the Persian Gulf? Or is the era of the Arabian Sea as an American lake permanently over? We read every comment at TGN, and we will continue to follow this story as it develops, because the 149 seconds may be over, but what comes next has barely begun.